Welcome, everyone. I'm Chari Elam with the Bee Supply Monthly Magazine, and I brought back somebody that you all might recognize. He was our guest for the webinar in, I guess it was August, right?
Yeah.
Marcus Hill, welcome.
Thank you, Shari. Thanks everyone for visiting today.
Yeah, I won't just go ahead and tell on myself because your presentation in that August webinar that was like to a lot of people. Bee biology happens to be my favorite topic, but you were out there and it was awesome for my nerdness to watch. And tell us why, and I know Blake described your background and why you know so much, but tell us why your bee nerdness is so out there and it is amazing your amount of knowledge. Tell us why.
Well, thank you. I started about 20 years ago knowing nothing about bees. If you'd have told me 25 years ago I'd be a beekeeper, I told you were crazy. But I moved to the island of Hawaii and needed a job, and just so happened the largest queen rearing operations in the world were about a 10-minute walk from my little apartment. So I walked down there and went from doing it not at all to doing it about 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, and spent a few years there raising hundreds of thousands of queens a year and really fell in love with it. Um, I met my wife in Hawaii also, and we relocated to upstate New York, where I kept some hobby hives and was pursuing other life interests for a career track. And she, in her infinite wisdom, told me I'm a bear in the morning when I do anything that doesn't involve bees. Why don't I just keep bees for a living? And I thought, well, you can do that. And she also told me that if this is going to work, it's going to have to be somewhere warmer than
Oh,
upstate New York. So we moved down to North Carolina, and I started a small sideliner beekeeping operation and a landscaping company there that kind of piggybacked one another. So and I also went to a local beekeeper association meeting where I met Juliana Rangel, who's now the professor at Texas A&M. And I talked to her after the meeting, and she asked if I would be able to help her with her postdoc work, and I jumped at it. So I spent a few years helping at North Carolina State as a research tech. Um, so that was a great crash course in a lot of things bee, all things queen quality. And I was primarily focusing in my own operation on nooks and packages and queen production. Very little honey because I more am in love with making queens. Um, and so from there, that dovetailed into a position as a research scientist with a contract research organization, and I built a business unit within that company called Bee Health and Management Solutions. So
see
we
that.
did a bunch of uh, contract research studies for registrants of plant protection products. So I had to learn all kinds of stuff in order to make sure that the husbandry was done correctly in order to yield actual replicable results and dose response curves to the different treatment levels of these plant protection products and various study types. Everything from a feeding study where you have 96 hives in 12 different apiaries with 5 different treatment levels, a couple of controls, and a reference, and a monitoring colony, which just lets you know what's out there, to studies in like OECD 75, where you put bees in a hoop house 25 feet wide by 75 feet long, and spray a crop with your test substance and pray they actually forage in it, because the bees are used to foraging miles, not within a tiny little
Right,
netting
right.
structure. So I really just tried to do everything I could to increase my knowledge, because I was also put in a position where I was giving presentations to various large plant protection product companies and other like symposiums and conferences. So tried to put together a nice stockpile of slides and information. And honestly, the more you dig into it, the more you find out you don't know, and the more interesting it becomes. Like, I've been accused of being an expert
Amen.
more times than I'd like to count, and I balk at that because experts know a lot about a little,
Mhm.
and I know a little about a lot, and I learn something new every day. So I'm by no
Amen.
means an expert, but
Yeah, amen.
luckily I am able to stand on the shoulders of giants, and I've
Right.
learned a lot from my involvement in both in academia and in research and in my own commercial operations. I built a couple of them myself and sold them, and started working with other people. Um,
And I'm somewhere Blake Shook came into the picture.
yes, yes, which is a blessing. It's a great company to work for,
It
so
is.
to be a
So
part
I
of.
didn't even say that in the beginning. Those that didn't watch the webinar, you were introduced as our head of beekeeping operations. And that means bees. You're our USA bee ops guy. And man, did we score with you.
Thank you.
Just saying. I mean, yeah, it's a team. Of course, you have a team, but we each have our gifts, and you have it. Bees, and what a super great asset you are to Desert Creek Honey, and even trickle down to TBS, the bee supply. And I'm gonna tell y'all why, because of what I just previously said, the bees. So we are embarking on actually the end of the year. We're getting very close, with just in a few months. So you're working on bee sales, the bees for sales and pollination for 2025. Am I right?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
So we're getting everything treated for mites, make sure everything has ample food stores. And of course, it varies per region and area, how much feed on there you actually need. Say in upstate New York, you'd need 90 to 120 pounds of
Hmm.
honey
Wow.
or sugar, so to speak, on top. In North Carolina, you need about 60 pounds to 70. I always err on the side of 70 if it says 60, give them 10 extra just in case. And I think in Texas, it's closer to about 40 that you'd need
Yeah.
to overwinter, which coincidentally, this is an interesting piece of trivia. 60 pounds of honey is about 60,000 cells of nectar slash honey filled. So it's basically 1,000 cells per pound, roughly.
1,000 cells per pound. Well, I've never heard it put that way.
Yes.
Always rounded it up. I've always rounded it up by weight, and said that a full deep, about give or take 10 pounds, because it just makes it easier for us to calculate, right? I mean, I think it's anywhere from 8 to 9.5 or whatever, but I've never heard the cells. Man, see,
in
I told you.
my in my research scientist incarnation, I had to uh, assess all the matrices in a hive. I started at 3%, and then they said, let's just do 5. So it's the nectar, 5, on a frame. And what was the bee coverage? How much pollen? How much nectar? How much open space? Eggs, larvae, pupae, all those things.
That
So
is so important. I'll tell you, this is going to be the biology nerd coming out in me. That is so important. And I think that new beekeepers, or even I'm gonna say those getting into 3, 4, 5, even 7, 8, 9 years into their journey, is that we've got to focus on that space, and what occupies that space. One thing that has often blown a new beekeeper's mind is that if I've got a fully capped frame of brood that's, dark, so I'm going to assume it's about to emerge, in just a matter of days, you're going to have a population explosion of upwards of 7,000 bees. If
right.
we're totally, I mean, we're, of course, guesstimate there. That's a big deal for your space. So if you just talked about, the what that cell's holding, whether it's honey or nectar or larva or bees, growing bees, that matters in how we manage our hive.
100%.
100%.
And the bees give you a great template because if you look at a frame, they put the honey, the nectar, the pollen, the eggs or young larvae, and then the capped brood. And so the way they set up the frame is exactly the way you should set up your box, where you have the honey on the outside, work your way in just like they have on a frame. So they'll teach you if you look.
And if you mess it up, they will correct you.
Yes, it causes an extra work, but they'll move it around for
They
sure.
will, and every time you open the box, they'll go, okay, it was you.
That's right. And they do remember faces. That's
You,
been shown. They have
you did
facial
it. Now,
recognition.
I it's kind of funny. We learn from our mistakes, or we're supposed to, right? We're supposed to learn from our mistakes. And in the very beginning of my journey, which was uh, I think right now, 13 years ago, 13 or 14 years ago. That doesn't sound like very long to a lot of people, but for me, it's a lifetime because I really and truly, I went from zero to crazy overnight. But we took everything so literally, so literally. If I see drone cells, then that must mean swarm. So what did that mean to me and my husband? Destroy all the drone cells.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What planet did I grow up on, right? We took everything so literally. Small hive beetles are bad. If you see them crawling around on your frames, they're bad. We didn't respect that template, like you just said. I love that phrase so much, so I wrote it down. I will give you credit for it though. We just took everything too literally and stopped. We weren't watching the bees and how they were laying out that template and what they were doing and giving them credit for knowing what they're doing. And all that we are is you know, we're there for the care and feeding if they need us. And we just took it too far and killed our first hive deader than a doorknob. I'm sure we're not the only one.
I've killed a few myself, so don't feel bad.
It's funny how the scientists actually, and you as well, y'all kill more bees than the rest of us because you're always out there working with them. And you're trying to, well, I interviewed a scientist person last month, and they've got so many working hives that they're trying to. We need more varroa in there. Cameron
Right.
Jackson's who I was talking
Right.
to. I need more varroa. Well, so you're trying to make sick hives.
Right.
Yeah, well, anyway. Well, so okay, so if you're a beekeeper right now, which you are, and you're getting ready for winter and you've got a lot of bees you've got to do that for because we're gonna need them come spring. What am I doing for my bees leading into, it's still hot here. We're gonna have 100-degree days. So generally, broad scope, what should I be doing?
You want to make sure that they're not starving in any way. Make sure they have plenty of calories. Feed them sugar syrup. You also want to make sure your mite counts. And I have a general rule: 2 mites per 100 bees or less. The best mite's a dead mite. And
I love that phrase.
the threshold is now about 3 mites per 100 bees, but
I do know that.
2 is really kind of my rule of thumb. So I'd go ahead and treat now because they're just about to start kicking off producing their winter bees, the diatomus bees, which are going to be your winter cluster. They're going to care for the developing brood after the winter solstice when she starts laying again, and they're going to be your foragers in the early spring. So they're very long lived, and they need to make sure, or we need to do our best to make sure that the nurse bees that are caring for those developing diatomus bees are well nourished. Otherwise, your winter bees won't be well nourished, and that
Love
can
that.
create a downward spiral, and you wind up with a starved, froze out colony with a bunch of dead bees at the bottom.
And I'm almost say almost equally as bad, or you end up with one that survived but in such poor shape
Yes.
that as they come out, they're just not able to do their jobs. You pronounce it diatonus. I have never pronounced it that way, but kind of like terms in the Bible. If I don't know how to say it, I just say it really fast. Diatonus is good. That is truly your long-lived bees. And, we think about spring and summer bees, they live what, 3, 4, 5 weeks tops. because they're working their little selves to death, right? Because of all the foraging activity. But these girls, they've got to live for months on end. And then they're going to go through this whole cycle where they've got their duties. We've seen that duties by age, right? And they've got to recycle that because they're going to have to come out on the other end and have to do some of those duties again,
Yep.
even though they've aged into almost old lady status. They've got to be good and healthy at the other end, months down the road, not weeks.
Exactly. And that's the miracle of vitilogenin, and just making sure your protein levels are
Yeah.
adequate to supply them. So if you're not getting enough pollen coming in your area, it's also a good idea to make sure you're supplementing with some pollen substitute. And if I were to say mix a dry powder pollen sub, I'd take some actually collected natural pollen and mix it together. So you get those additional phytochemicals and nutrients that the bees need instead of just crude protein, because it's not just protein and carbohydrates. There's a whole nutritional spectrum that, just like human beings, that bees need. So
I wrote an article about that, matter of fact, just the other day about the protein value of this time of year plants is just, so inconsistent, and in some areas virtually non-existent. Anywhere from 6 to 61%, I think, is really what I've drilled it down to, and you may know better than that, but it was like, so if we've got crude protein at 6%, or we've got it at 40, let's just say 40 or whatever percent, what's the repercussions of the difference? There's a lot
sure.
in the health.
Yep.
I call it see, now I can't say it because you said it different. Vitellogen is how I say it.
I don't know if I'm correct when I say
That sounded good.
but yeah.
But really, that's just their ability, for those that don't know, is just their ability to store fat, basically, the protein, their energy, their resources for the winter.
Right, right. It actually, their hypopharyngeal gland, which produces the royal jelly, the brood food, with higher vitilogenin levels, that hypopharyngeal gland stays very healthy and large. When they feed their vitilogenin back to a colony, that hypopharyngeal gland atrophies. So foragers actually feed all their vitilogenin back to a colony before they jump out and start foraging, so that that vitilogenin is always in the mix, and they're not wasting it. But if those foragers were fed vitilogenin back, their atrophied hypopharyngeal gland can return to function.
Isn't that cool?
Sort of a fountain of youth for them. So eat more egg whites. It might work for us too, Who knows?
Right. Gosh, that's good for me to know, to learn at my age, for sure. That is so interesting.
It really is.
I just think that is so interesting. What a cool bug we work with, right?
Right.
It really is. So, I mean, we're talking about nutrition, folks. I mean, the bees, although they know what they're doing, they know how to forage, and they know how to do this. Their environment, their climate, the differences each year can make such a difference of what our interaction needs to be, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, year to year, and even your area. I mean, you can have, an apiary 2 miles, 3 miles away from another apiary, and they're entirely different.
Yeah.
You really got to pay attention to what are they bringing in, and what are the bees telling you they need? Are you seeing shake out when you shake a frame and nectar's coming out? Okay, you may not need to feed those, but a mile, 3 miles down the road at your next yard, if you happen to have a few, you may not be seeing that, so you'd need to feed. At the same time, when I do mite treatments, no matter the size of your operation, if you have 5 hives, 50 hives, 5,000, 50,000, it's all one box. So treat all of them for the mites.
That's right. It is all one box.
Right.
That's another article I wrote. I hate to tell you, but this is what I said in the article. You have mites.
Yes, 100%.
You have mites. And nutrition, good nutrition. There's no point in suffering, across the board suffering. We know our bees have mites, and we have a responsibility to do something, whatever that is for you. I touch on that a little bit, and we will again in a minute, but if you keep healthy bees nutrition wise, then you're going to have a much better outcome with mites and so forth and other pests and viruses, to be real. So keeping good, healthy bees is huge. And knowing your area, like you said, and you were talking about bee yards, sometimes in the same yard. I've got one hive does great, one right next to it. It's like, where are you going?
Right,
This
right,
one's doing fine. Follow your neighbor.
right.
What are you doing? But
Sometimes though, if you find, especially during a nectar flow, but if you find one's really struggling, the other one's really booming, just switch their positions
that's
during a
right.
nectar flow, and the forager force will be caught by the weaker hive, and you can bolster it up.
I've said that a time or two, I've done it 1,000 times.
Right.
So that's a nugget for everybody to, if you have one that's not thriving, not doing well, and one right beside it is, or even, down the road, switch it. Just
Mhm.
give it whatever that one had. And not most always the one that when you replace it with the one that wasn't doing well, that one does fine. I don't know. That one didn't want to be in that spot in the earth. What can I say?
Of course, make sure you've checked for any symptoms of disease and stuff. You mitigated
Of
any of
course.
that prior, but
We'll call that a good segue. So let's talk about that. Let's talk, because we've touched on it several times, about Varroa. Tis the season. We're testing all ours, and we've already pulled honey, and our numbers have been good this year with the mites.
good, good.
I'm not gonna say we're lucky, because luck has nothing to do with it. It's just been a good year. Our bees, which are nearly 100% bee supply bees, are just good bees. What you talked about 3% really. I'd read that Honeybee Health Coalition has teetered on that.
Right.
So 2%, 3% threshold, that can actually be quite a bit. Do I treat it 2%, or do I if I see 2%, can I wait till it's 3?
I wouldn't. I go ahead and treat now, and then do another mite count as you get towards September, and you may treat again. The name of the game is just to keep that mite level suppressed.
Right.
Then you have a better chance for your bees to be healthy. You have a better chance to have a lower viral load in your population, and a better chance for each of those developing nurse bees to have uh, to be healthy enough to have a active large hypopharyngeal gland to feed those developing winter bees. So
See how that made full circle right there?
that's right. I always tell people, like, when we're getting ready for our nectar flow, say in March, April, making splits, the bees are getting ready for next year.
Yeah.
That's their entire program, is that in the spring and summer of 2024, they're not worried about spring and summer of 2024. They're worried about surviving winter and getting 2025 done. So
Mhm.
they're bringing in all these resources to make sure that they're able to survive and hopefully procreate, swarm, or we can capture those and call them a split.
Right.
And but each year they're getting ready for the next year, so they're thinking ahead. So we need to make sure we do too.
That's right. That's right. So, because we do too. That's why I've taken the words before you said them. That's right. We have to make sure that we're thinking ahead as well. And one thing that we learned a long time ago is that with each inspection, you really and truly are doing 3. You're looking back at the one previous to, you're doing the one you're doing now, and you're preparing for the one that's next. So there's 3 inspections at play every time you go in there. And that's just, oh my gosh, so huge with varroa mites. If you do a mite count today, think about what that mite count is going to be in just a matter of days, because every time you have a cell open, there's the option for more mites to emerge.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I can't stress it enough, and I'm sure that in your journeys and travels, you have had to say at a time or two, we have to stay on top of mites.
Oh, 100%. I was lucky enough when I first started beekeeping, there were no varroa mites in Hawaii on the Big Island. And they came when I arrived, and small hive beetle came around the time I left. And I didn't cause either of those, but it was very, I was very lucky to have had an opportunity to actually work with bees that didn't have that
Wow.
problem. So I got to see what it was like back in, say, the 1970s of beekeeping.
Wow. I don't know what that's like, but I think it's become more serious as the years gone by. I think that we take it more seriously now. Well, I think that there was because again, I started, shortly after 2010, give or take. Um, it, it was, I think it was in the denial stage at a point there. And now with the numbers, especially what BIP puts out, Bee Informed Partnership puts out every year, it's like, that is reality.
Right.
And I tell you, at 44%, I don't think I even looked at this year's numbers. I haven't done that yet. That comes out in June, right?
Yeah,
Do you know what it was?
I haven't looked
Well,
either, but it's roughly half of the hives in the country die each year. So
so we have to take this seriously.
yes.
We have to take this seriously and rotate out your treatment methods and stay educated on it. It seems like and I don't know if this is something that you've been a part of in your travels, because you have, is the product development of mite treatments, seems at a snail's pace. But I'm quite certain on the back end that somebody is working at rabbit's pace trying to do something for us. But on this end, we're not making much progress.
Yeah, 100%. It takes a long time and a lot of capital for any new compounds to be registered. So, for the most part, and unfortunately, the beekeeping industry isn't the cash cow. So most chemical companies are going to be focusing their research dollars on things that are going to return more bang for the buck.
Mhm.
Um, but formic acid, uh, apagard, the active ingredient thymol, and
Mhm.
oxalic acid are a
That's
great
our staples.
arsenal to rotate,
Mhm.
through. I mean, obviously, with temperatures of 100 degrees, you're going to avoid the formic acid.
Just about everything, really. We pull back.
Yeah, I mean, but oxalic is in a vaporizer. That can help knock them down, and
Mhm.
then the vegetable glycerin, oxalic acid
Yeah.
um, pads that you can put on. They help keep the mite levels.
Not so much in our area. I had that talk with Cameron actually last month, because of our humidity level. It
Yeah, it just goes
just
out too quick.
almost really negates that. We had the pleasure, the honor to mirror Randy Oliver's study with a youth student here, and we were in constant contact between Randy and the youth and ourselves, and had our own study apiaries here doing that back, gosh, what year was that? 13 or 14 when he started, 14 maybe. And we just didn't have the results that he had, unfortunately, and we were mirroring it. But having said that, 100 degrees is a problem. We tend to just knock them down with Apivar
Right,
after honey flow, get them knocked down, and then we are usually able to sustain until that last go around where we can use OA
right.
with it. And there's a couple of more products out on the AP Bioxyls, a good one that, what's the other one? Easy Ox. We've not used that, and I plan, that's in our plan this year to get with. I want to make sure I don't run out of time before I ask you some other questions. What about everybody knows that it's the yellow-legged hornet. Have you heard anything? Because you're in such a, you're in the know, so I'm gonna throw that out at you if you know anything, any new news.
Very little. I mean, the murder hornet that predates on honeybees, and yeah, I know they found it in Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of concern, say in Florida and other places. And if it's alive, it'll spread. Um, but I don't know that much
Oh,
about it
good.
or what its spread is at this point, or if our, you know, if our American, so to speak, honeybees have the same kind of defense as the Asian honeybees, where they ball it up and overheat them and try to kill them. But I mean, if they're just
Now,
hanging out, picking off one by one, uh, you're you're going to distract the bees in your hive from their tasks to playing a more defensive role. So it's may just be more need for you to provide greater amounts of resources to them, since they're having to battle other predators. But
I'm glad that you've not heard more because that means that it's not infiltrated the commercial industry to
yeah,
any.
to the best of my knowledge, it's not a huge concern at this point. Varroa is probably the biggest, Varroa and viruses,
Mhm.
and but as far as it's great headlines, and I'd like to
I
just keep
know.
it great headlines and nothing more. But it's something to definitely keep an eye on.
It is, and I get asked about it just because in my community, people associate it, I mean, to them, it's just another bee, you know,
Right, right.
right? And they read the articles and think, oh no, are y'all being able to deal with that and all? And as far as I know, it's not anywhere here. I talked to Jamie Ellis, I want to say it was first of the year, probably February, maybe. I don't even remember now. And so far, it's still, we're over in that part, the Georgia, northern Florida. And it is staying right there. So let's hope that it's not like the Varroa and just gets on a bust.
Right,
to
right.
the
I have a
rest of
lot
it.
of friends that keep bees in Georgia, and I haven't heard them mention it as something they're
Good,
really
good.
concerned about either. So,
Well, it's a different transmittal. I mean, it's not like the Varroa that, because with commercial beekeepers, the Varroa travels on the bee itself. This
right,
is a different kind of bug. It's
right,
not the same. It's an independent, I'll call it an antisocial bee because it really overwinters with just a queen,
right.
like a bumblebee. So it's not a social group that perpetuates year after year after year. It goes down to nothing over winter and then recreates itself each year. So I think that's on our side. We'll hope that that's on our side. And there's always, and of course we have that new Varroa bug, and I can never remember the name of that. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's one that's
That hasn't come here yet, and
it's a
hopefully never
parasite.
will
Yeah,
in
they're
truffle
watching.
labs.
Yes.
Yes, I pray it never shows up on our shores, but it's probably inevitable.
Yeah.
Um, and I know formic acid works well against it, but it's not a fun character. It's yeah,
Not from what I've read. It's really not. Well, there's always going to be something keeping us on our toes. It seems like we won't ever go back to the 70s where there's not something that's
right, right.
right. But that kind of is across the board for us as well, right? For
Yeah,
sure.
for sure.
As we go into winter, what are your thoughts on, because as I'm writing these articles leading off into the cooler months, which I'm looking very forward to, not, I want to still wear my flip-flops, but I don't, I understand it gets cold in other places, not so much here. But I think about as this beekeeper, as I'm leading into winter, I've got my Varroa, I'm really on top of that. I'm staying on top of that, but my space, the space bee to box ratio, okay? Thinking about collapsing some, shrinking them down. We're not in the grow it stage now. We're in the, shrink it stage. Is there any advice you can give beekeepers on how to go over winter with the right size and what you're looking for?
Um, just as a general rule, I'd always say you want a basketball sized cluster of bees, and really towards October, I would go ahead and set up my bottom box. If we're running to 10 frame deeps, set up my bottom box so there's honey on the outside, pollen, your eggs and larvae and cap brood and your bees down there, and just put up top, have that full of honey. And the
I love
cluster should move up and should move over, but a lot of times doesn't move over. But it's basically just make sure you have an adequate bee population. If you have a colony that you're worried about its size, combine it with something else.
Mhm.
If it's too small, it's not going to make it anyway. So you can take a piece of newspaper and do an I don't know if you're familiar with newspaper
I
colony.
am. I did a video on it.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So very, that's how we do it.
Put a piece of newspaper, put the bees on top, put a couple of slits in there. They'll eat through and acclimate. Obviously, you have to kill the queen on the underperforming hive. But then that population should join forces with the slightly stronger hive and give you a hive that is more capable of surviving the winter than a dink. So don't waste your time on the dinks. Just
Yeah,
combine them with something else.
agreed completely. And those that don't know what a dink is, I mean dinky. Ew, not strong. Yeah, for sure. You're just not, I remember sitting at a conference one year about, they actually did a study. They got a grant, got money for, always surprised me what you can get money for, a study to see how much intervention you can do and how much it costs you, labor wise, product wise, treatment, whatever, to take a dink and bring it to healthy status. It just flat doesn't pay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's where the study landed, was that you're throwing your money away to throw good money after bad and try to save those dinks because they're not going to make it. You need the population, and to circle back to biology, you need those age of bees. You need the ones that stronger colony has, obviously in numbers, that one that's struggling doesn't. It missed something. It veered off track. Something happened, whether it was the varroa that did it or the climate, that they didn't get the nutrition they needed, whatever. They're missing something in that that works. So giving them that from that good colony can make all the difference in the world, and combining it makes that.
Yeah, each caste within the caste system of the bee colony is important. They all have their roles to play, and if one of those is inadequate, then it just creates more need for the younger ones to jump and fill that space, and then your next generations just don't have what they need, and yeah, it just goes from bad to worse.
Does go to bad to worse, and then you end up with a hive that dies out in the field over winter, or comes out totally weak, like we talked about earlier.
And you've got 4 feeders full of syrup that you've tried to feed to it. And yeah.
And that's money, y'all.
Yeah.
Golly, if I could put, and I'm sure I could do the math, because every year I have to do the math. If I were to add all of the amount of money we've had to put in feed over the years, I might could buy a house. But that's okay.
That's
We've made
right.
a lot of honey too. We've had really good, we've had good years for that, So, all right. Well, I think that we kind of covered everything. Is there something that I missed that you want to tell us about?
No, well, one thing, if you're a hobbyist, that they do in England, and if you're more of a non-chemical kind of beekeeper person, during a nectar flow, you can cage your queen for about 2 brood cycles, and that will help knock your mite levels down too. So basically 42 days. Put her in a cage, keep her in the hive so that they understand their queen right. You'll probably have a bunch of eggs in that cage, but that can help knock your mite levels down. And just remember that there's a civilization in every box. So your job as a beekeeper is to try to make sure that that civilization is functioning, but they know best what they're doing. So pay attention to what they're telling you, and give them what they say they need.
I love that. That's you got some pretty good little phrases there, man.
Thanks. It took a few years, but
Take a few, write those down.
Well,
Yeah. Because it's good information and stuff that we can all take forward because every year's different. And I think that's my takeaway on this is that we have to amend ourselves as beekeepers every year. You know, there's the same core things that take place every year, but we have to amend our actions to what our current status is. And it could be just single box status or bee yard status or weather or whatever. But well, I enjoyed talking to you,
yeah, it's
Marcus.
been a lot of fun. Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate the
Yes.
invite and your time. Thank you.
We might get back with you in the spring when it gets really crazy and you don't have any time. And I'm going to send you that email and you'll go, I'm too busy right now. But I'm going to want to hear about how the bees are doing so good because I really appreciate your knowledge and I want everyone else to take that as well. That this knowledge base is what's raising our bees for the bee supply and Desert Creek pollination and bulk bees and everything that encompasses us as a company. And I feel good about that. I'm glad you are at the helm because it means my bees are going to be good in the spring.
Well, thanks. I will do my best.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming, Marcus, and we'll talk soon.
My pleasure. Have a good one. Thank you.